Question number 4, Grant Robertson.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance. How many operating surpluses, if any, using the Total Crown OBEGAL measure has the government posted in its 6 years in office?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, the government has not posted any operating surpluses in its 6 years of office, starting with the one we inherited in 2008-9, a deficit of $3.9 billion left behind by the previous government, and that was when the economy was growing fairly significantly. And since then, we have moved steadily, as I pointed out before, to repair the fiscal damage left by the previous government, but also to deal with recession and earthquakes, and we haven't made bad progress.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
In light of that answer, what is Treasury's forecast for surplus or deficit in this current financial year, the year that he and John Key promised New Zealanders we would finally see a surplus?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, Treasury's forecast, I think, for the 14-15 year currently stands at around minus $500 million. That is a small deficit, and that's after 10 or 11, after a number of forecasts of surplus. But it could be that they have taken too much notice of that member, who of course has been opposed to every aspect of fiscal restraint exercised by this government in the last 6 years.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Is it correct that his government rejected officials' advice that would have seen ACC levies cut by $658 million, given that the worker and earners account are more than fully funded?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, I think we did reject that advice, as we reject a lot of officials' advice, because often officials' advice is unbalanced and doesn't take into account all the objectives of the government. There's no particular item that makes surplus achievable or not achievable. Budgets are put together in the whole, counting expenditure on health, education, corrections, innovation, science and research, and that will continue to be the case in this budget as well.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Well, given that answer, is it correct that officials have advised the government that ACC levies will be $60 a year more for the average household, and for businesses with more than 10 staff, $1,500 more, simply to help him manufacture a surplus in his budget in May?
Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, the member may not be aware of this, but all these issues were canvassed in detail, I think, at the time of the last budget, and I'd expect them to go and do a bit of homework on that budget. As I said before, the government has made decisions about ACC in the same way as it decides, for instance, to give schools an increase in their operational budget. That's just or allocate $400 or $500 million to health. It's just part of putting a whole budget together, and ACC is one of many decisions that add up to whether there's a surplus or not a surplus.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Will he guarantee to New Zealand workers and businesses that they will not be paying more than they need to in ACC levies simply to help him manufacture a budget surplus?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, of course I can say that. Of course, you've got to remember that any decisions about ACC levies are based on forecasts, and the forecasts almost always turn out to be wrong. They're either too high or too low, and in retrospect you can see that. So this government has taken a conservative view of both increasing and decreasing ACC levies, and along the way has ignored officials' advice to increase them too far, and we haven't always taken notice of officials' advice to decrease them too far.
Supplementary question, Joanne Hayes.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister, what was Treasury's forecast for Crown debt levels when the National-led government was first elected in 2008?
Oh, that's a good question.
Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, well, I've seen a number of such reports because All sorts of people make it more challenging for the government to return its finances to surplus. One such report is a photo of a picket-waving protester calling for more government spending outside the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment offices here in Wellington. Another involves a photo of the same protester calling for more government spending outside the Statistics Department here in central Wellington. And a third involves the same individual complaining about efficiencies in the public sector. And the individual in both the photos is Grant Robertson, the current finance spokesman for the opposition, who says we should have made bigger surpluses sooner, somehow by spending more government money.
Supplementary, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Joanne Hayes.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister, what reports has he seen on policies that would make it even more challenging for the government to return its finances to surplus?
Well, Mr Speaker, there's been a range of other reports from opposition spokespeople, not just the Labour Party, I might say others.
Order. Point of order, Grant Robertson.
The Minister of Finance has no responsibility for opposition spokespeople, which is what he's now going in to describe the words of.
I don't see how the member knows that at this stage. Order. I didn't hear that from the member. If the minister is about to attack the opposition or the opposition spokesperson, then that is not in order.
You can give it the
question.
Mr Speaker.
I'll allow the minister to finish his answer.
Mr Speaker, it's not uncommon to find individuals or groups in our community who advocate the government should get to surplus sooner, and at the same time that it should increase spending against a given amount of revenue. These things cannot both happen at the same time. But that's clearly who Grant Robertson, opposition finance spokesman, is listening to.
Question number 5, Materia Ture.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker, tēnā koutou te whare.